Welcome, everyone. It is your girl, Marcie Thomas. I am super excited to be here with you this evening. I actually had muted myself. Shame on me, but I am here for another episode of Live Well Sister, and I am so excited for what we're going to talk about this evening because it's something I've been really in conversation with friends and family over a course of time, even today, and it's something that I think is really important. So I'm glad that you are here. So I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta. So if you're here and it's your first time, or if you've been here before, or if you don't mind dropping in the chat where you're joining us from, just so we can kind of get an idea of who is here. So tonight's conversation is just really important because it's one of those things that's going to happen to each and every one of us if we just keep on living, and that is to get older or to mature. And so our special guest tonight is going to talk to us about her brand new book, which just came out yesterday, Radiant Rebellion, Reclaim Aging, Practice Joy, and Raise a Little Hell Along the Way. I love that. I love that so much. So our special guest is Karen Walrond, who is the author of The Lightmaker's Manifesto, How to Work for Change Without Losing Your Joy. She is a lawyer, leadership coach, and activist. In her work, she has helped thousands of people around the world find purpose and meaning in their lives. Karen and her work have been featured on Brene Brown's Unlocking Us podcast, PBS, Huffington Post, CNN.com, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. A very much sought after speaker, she is also the author of The Beauty of Different, and her award-winning blog, Chukulunks, is a lifestyle, inspiration, and photography destination. Karen and her family currently reside in Houston, Texas. And without any further delay, let's welcome Karen to the stage.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I am so glad to have you here because, as I was saying offline, things just aligned. It's like this came together in less than 10 days.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. It was meant to be.
So yes, it was definitely meant to be. So first of all, congratulations on your latest book.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's very, very exciting. Last night was the book launch, and I'm about to go on book tour, so it's a very exciting time over here.
Yes. So this just to start, what
Yeah.
was it that made you decide at this juncture of your life journey to write a book about aging or
Yeah.
what it means to get older?
Well, so last year, I wrote the book last year, and last year was a big, big year for me. I was about to celebrate my 20th anniversary. I turned 55. And my daughter, or my only child, turned 18 and graduated high school and went off to college. So it was like a lot of milestones. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found interesting was that the only thing people seemed to be happy about of those things was the 20-year marriage. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they would be like, "Oh, you're going to turn 55. How you feeling about that?" And double nickel, is that okay? Or, "Oh, your daughter 18. How you doing, mama? She's going to be leaving home soon. Are you?" And it really sort of confounded me because, I never was a person that ever feared aging. So 55 was awesome. Like, it was fine. And my
Right.
daughter, like, that getting her out of the house and going to a school that she loved to study what she wanted was always the goal. So the idea that I should be in mourning about that felt really strange. Of course I would miss her, but
Okay.
I wasn't sad about it. There was no part of me that was ever sad about it. And so I really wanted to explore that, why people are nervous about getting older and these sort of milestones, right?
Mm.
But also I wondered, what if I'm wrong? What if I really should be getting upset about all of these things and it's just not hit me yet, right? And so, what are some of the practices that I could do to make sure that I stay in this framework of being optimistic and happy about my coming years? And so, I honestly got into the book expecting to write a book that was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Aging's no big deal," right?
Mhm.
What I ended up writing was totally different, and it ended up being sort of a manifesto about ageist culture and how we should rage against it.
Right, right. And that's what I found just so powerful about it because I mean it's several things. 'Cause I was telling you I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today,
Mhm.
and I have been saying it for years, even before reading your book. That it's not necessarily my desire, no desire to retire. You know that rhyme.
Right,
But
right.
it's like I don't really want to retire. Do I want to get to a space where I have more control over how I spend my time and how I use my days? Absolutely. But I
Mhm.
don't look at getting older as something like, oh, I need to go somewhere and sit down and whatever. I look at it as that would be the time for me to really, really fully engage in all of the things that I've always wanted to do.
Of
So I look
course.
forward, to that time where I can, be able to, maybe make a few different decisions.
Absolutely, and you know, the to be clear, the book is not about or not intended for just people in midlife, right? Like it's I'm writing it and I'm in midlife, so there's that, but it really is for anybody who thinks about aging. Anybody who thinks about it or worries about it, which can be very young when you start to think about aging. Um but for me, when I talk to friends of mine that are our age, because I think you and I are similar ages, there's so much freedom that comes
Mhm.
right around this age because a lot of times we are sort of well, we're certainly wiser about the world. We know ourselves better. We know what we want in life. Our kids are probably leaving home, so now we're no longer beholden to an academic calendar, perhaps
Right.
in the way that we were. And so there's a lot of potentiality about the years that come ahead. And so the idea that you should slow down is it's just so preposterous. Like, when I think about friends of mine who were my age, they're writing best-selling books and starting podcasts and, like, writing musicals and making movies, and there's so much that's happening. So, I really didn't understand that disconnect, but then also I found out, of course, that the world is sort of designed for us to think that way, right? Like it's
Right.
actually baked into the culture, and that's why we think that way. And so I hope when people read the book they start to sort of get curious about what would it look like if they stopped buying what the world is trying to sell us about getting older.
Absolutely. And that's why I love you have the book broken down into four different sections. We start with ignite, then we go to disrupt, connect, and then envision.
Mm.
And in each one of those sections of the book and the chapters within them, it's like you're telling your story, you're telling the stories of people that you're sharing some research and things like that with us. So it's really well-rounded to tell the story. And it's like I love how like you have one chapter and you end the chapter in a way that leads you into the
Yep.
next chapter. So it's very well written, and I really
Thank
did
you.
enjoy reading it. And I told you I knocked it out in a day just because it was like, yes, I could relate to so much of it.
Mm.
But in the ignite section in the very beginning, you talk a lot about some of the preconceived notions that we may have about what it even means to get older, and how, as you said, there are systems and structures in place to kind of make us feel antsy about something that's natural.
Yeah, for sure. One of the and honestly, the history of why we dislike getting older was a real surprise to me. And I actually was talking to a friend of mine before I wrote the book, as I was just getting started, and I said, "Well, if I were to write a book about joyful aging, what is something that you would hope that I would touch on?" And she said, "Well, I'd be really interested to know if we always hated aging, right?" And I thought that's such a really interesting question. I hadn't even considered that. So let's find out. And I came across the research of a doctor. She's a psychiatrist and a medical historian. Her name is Dr. Laura Hirschbein. And she had wondered the same thing. So she decided to do some research. And the way that she approached it, which I thought was so interesting, is that she looked up popular magazines at the turn of the 20th century because she figured popular articles would capture sort of the zeitgeist, the culture of what we were thinking about aging. And what she found was that most of those articles were written by people who were older, who were in their 80s and 90s, and they were very positive. And it was sort of like, I love being older. I love being the keeper of tradition, or sort of the holder of knowledge, the holder of history. And yes, of course, my back hurts. And yes, I have a trick knee, but that's nothing. Like the real potential of being older and the wisdom that comes with it is fantastic, right? And so people generally looked forward to getting older at the 1900s. Fast forward to two world wars and a Great Depression, and now these 80 and 90-year-olds who are still working are making it difficult for these younger men, and let's face it, it was men, 30-year-olds, to get work after this, the wars and the Great Depression. And so they were having a hard time supporting their families. And so the US government decided, well, you know what? We need a mandatory retirement age so we can get these older people out of the workforce and have
Mm,
jobs for these 30-year-olds, right? Well intended in theory.
right.
But what ended up happening is now these older people are not contributing to the economy. So they're now seen as a burden, right?
Mhm.
And then the worst part is that child psychologists and pediatricians decided to research what happens when you get older because geriatrics didn't exist.
Right.
And they used as the standard 5-year-olds. So if you
Mm,
did not have the cognitive ability of a 5-year-old whose like whole job in life is to learn, or
right.
the agility, physical agility of a 5-year-old, then you were impaired. So now all
Mm,
these doctors are writing about how impaired these 80 and 90-year-olds because they don't move or think as quickly as a 5-year-old. So now older people are now really seen as burdens, and then enter Clairol, right?
right.
You don't want people to think you're old, so you better dye your hair. And that
Mm,
all happened in the first 50 years of the 20th century. So within 50 years, we went from loving aging to fearing it because we didn't want to be seen as a burden in society, which was fascinating to me. So it literally is, our discomfort with aging is literally a product of capitalist patriarchy, 100%.
and that's crazy. That is so
Yeah.
crazy. Think that,
Yeah.
to say, okay, yeah, now you're 65 and you need to retire, and you get your Social Security, which is barely enough to live on.
Right.
For
Right.
the average person. And then you've already touched on it, the whole thing of, okay, now we've got all these creams and this hair color and, all of these different things to try to encourage you to not want to look the age that you are, or, to not be seen as getting older even when you are. And so that I just find that, well, and of course, this audience is predominantly Black women, so we know Black doesn't crack. So the age
We do
are
have that.
we generally don't look our age, but the
Yeah.
reality of it is that, we do mature, we do get older. And, just the fact that we live in a society that would try to, put us away or push us to the side, or think that we should be pushed away or pushed to the side just because we've got a few more candles on the birthday cake every year.
Absolutely. And the thing is, this whole anti-aging industry that you're talking about, it's a $1 trillion industry worldwide, largely unregulated, and its target age is 24. So you start getting this message that, oh my God, you don't want to get older. Actually, you get it much younger. You get it when you're a child and people tell you about the mean old woman at the end of the road in their fairy tales, or the old crone witch, right? Like it's always the older person. So we're indoctrinated in it from very, very
Mm-hmm.
young. But also, like 24-year-olds, it's 5 years out of your teenage years, and suddenly you should be careful about fine lines and wrinkles and all the other things that you should be worried about. Like it's really very, very insidious, and it's everywhere. It's absolutely, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you start to see how you're constantly being marketed to, from everything, from the creams, from everything, from the way that celebrities aren't allowed to age, especially women,
Right.
that they have to look like they're 20 all the time. You get this message that aging is an unnatural and unwanted thing that you never want to do, which is just crazy. It is literally just crazy, crazy making and crazy sounding. It's insane.
It really is. It really is. Now, one thing, as I mentioned in the book, you incorporate a lot of your own journey in your story. And I love, like, also in the first section of the book, you talk about putting your pilot light or doing work to get your pilot light to come back on. Talk about that, because
Yeah.
I found that very fascinating. And I love the whole concept of working towards getting your light to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually came sort of as a shocking realization for me is when that happened. I live in Houston, Texas, and we lost our home in
Mhm.
Hurricane Harvey, and we lost everything. Like we lost all our clothing, our cars, everything. We had to take everything down to the ground, right, and rebuild from that. So um, to get from a completely ruined house to moving back into a house was about 15 months of literally rebuilding. And I share in the book catching a glimpse of my reflection right as we've moved into this new house. And my immediate thought was, "Oh my gosh, I've aged," right? And I thought, "Well, let me look at what is it that I'm aging?" And like you said, black don't crack. So I didn't have any more lines than
Mm.
I didn't notice anything. I was still dyeing my hair, so it wasn't because I was silver, even though I am silver now. It wasn't because of that. So I was like, I don't see anything that shows age. And it dawned on me, oh, this isn't age, this is stress. The
Mhm.
thing that I'm looking at, the sallow skin, the fact that I'm just not looking well, is about stress. And I felt a bit of relief because I thought, I can't reverse aging. Age is going to happen, but I can reverse stress. Like maybe. Let's see what happens. And so
Mhm.
it was the end of the year. I was right before a new year, and I thought, my resolution is going to be that I'm going to just start paying attention to taking care of myself. Not I'm going to join a gym and I'm going to work out. Like I didn't want anything big. I was just like, I'm going to drink lots of more water. I'm going to try to move more often. I'm going to try to eat healthier food if I think, try to make sure I'm eating well, not restrictive, but just well. And I'm going to
Mhm.
make sure that I get a, close to 8 hours of sleep a night as I can. Right. And those were sort of just little practices. And it worked. I started looking better. And a year later, a friend of mine was visiting, and she's like, "What is going on here? Like, what? You look good. What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I sort of let it go. She goes, "No, no, no. You're doing something. What are you doing?" And so I shared the story with her, and I said, as I was looking in the mirror that day, I realized it wasn't age, and she interrupted and said, "Your pilot light had gone out." And I was like,
Mhm.
that's it, exactly, my pilot light, and I've been working on getting it relit. And I think the big lesson from that is sometimes we look in the mirror and we conflate stress with age, right?
Mhm.
And age is something that's going to happen. Like there's no reversing that. You're going to age. But stress is something that you can actually take control over and you can sort of manage, right? There's certain things that you can do. That's not to say that you're going to get rid of stress
Right.
altogether, but sort of having these practices of I'm noticing I'm stressed, so I need to breathe, or I'm noticing that I'm feeling lonely, so I'm going to reach out to people, or I'm going noticing that my skin doesn't look that good. Maybe I'll start drinking some more water, or or what am I eating something wrong? And just paying attention to what we're doing can do wonders. And I think I look better now, even though I've clearly aged since then because I've let my
Mhm.
hair go silver, right? Like I can see the age on me, and yet I look better than I did back then because I'm managing my stress better.
Yes. And you do look good, and I
Oh,
do
thank
like silver.
you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, and this is not dyed, so I have some up in there
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah?
Yes.
How did you manage to keep it? Because look, girl, that was all up in there with me.
I
I
don't
very
know. I
recently.
don't know, because my father, he had a lot of gray. My mom didn't really start getting it until later, so I'm thinking I'm taking after her.
Yeah,
Perhaps. Yeah, there's a few up there, but really not that
yeah.
many.
My parents are the opposite. I actually think I'm probably grayer now than my dad, but
Oh,
my mother's
wow.
hair is completely white. So I
Wow.
suspect I'm going that way, which I hope. I really would love to have like just really, really white hair. So we'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
I think it's beautiful. I
Thank
I do think it's beautiful.
thank you.
Well, in this next section, in section 2 of the book, you talk a lot about disruption. And now, of course, everybody, we can't talk about everything, but this is just to kind of give you a tip of what the book is about. And but in there, you talk a lot about rebellion, like how you start out talking about how we rebel against some of the things that we've been taught about what it means to be young versus what it means to be older.
Yeah. And I feel like because this is an audience primarily of Black women, I feel like for me, I had a little bit of practice for that just growing up Black. Um, just growing up Black, right? I'm originally from the Caribbean, and it didn't matter whether or not I was in the Caribbean or the U.S. That there's all these really Eurocentric ideas of what pretty means or what beautiful means. And
Mhm.
and I grew up, my mother was like, you want to line the inside of your lips because we Black women have full lips and that's not attractive, or you want to contour your nose to make it look thinner because we have broad noses. And I remember that as growing up, and I remember thinking that that seemed weird, but okay, right? Like, because I was 13 years old. Um and then, I was an engineer and I was a lawyer in oil and gas. And I remember sitting there trying to dress like how I thought a lawyer or an engineer in oil and gas should, which is not, it's so ridiculous because the truth is, when I was doing all of that, what an engineer or a lawyer in oil and gas looked like was a middle-aged, paunchy white guy, right?
Right.
Like there is no way I am ever going to look like what is, and it finally sort of clicked with me that, oh, this is dumb. Like I can't look like I'm going to walk in the room and people are going to make assumptions anyway. So I might as well just be me, right? And so I started really like, okay, I'm not going to do those things, and I'm not going to straighten my hair, because at the time I was straightening my hair, and I'm not going to like worry about my lip line or any of those things, and we'll see what happens. And of course, nothing happened, right? Like
Right.
nobody said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And let's, no. And it was such, and that's really actually a lesson that I take into getting older, and that I
Mm.
think everybody, like a lot of the fears that we have about, well, I could never do that because I'm a certain age, or I could never wear that because I'm a certain age, or I shouldn't try that because I'm a certain age. It's astound the idea of going, you know what, I'm going to try it anyway,
Right.
is a lot scarier feeling than it actually will be in practice. Like you're going to do these things and go, oh, nobody's really paying any attention. Or,
Right.
or they are, one of the people that I think I've been sort of fascinated by recently is the actor Pamela Anderson, who was,
Mhm.
in Baywatch and everything else. And she was just in Fashion Week and went out on Fashion Week in these fabulous clothes with no makeup. And the whole world was like, you look amazing, right? And what they're reacting
Mhm.
to, I mean, she looked great, but they're reacting to is the fact that she was like, I'm just not going to play by the rules anymore. I'm just going to
Right.
do, and people are drawn to that. Like people
Mhm.
are drawn to when you go, enough. I'm going to be me, and I'm not, and be me does not mean I'm going to be disrespectful, or it doesn't mean that I'm going to be slovenly, or it's just like I'm going to show up in the best me that I can, and this is how I define the best me. People love that. It
It's true.
absolutely happened with my silver hair. Like I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I don't know. And I can't leave the house now without somebody saying that they love my hair. And my hair does, I mean, my hair's fine, but I think what they're reacting to is I'm clearly not in my 80s or 90s, which seems to be the only age we ever see people with silver hair, but I'm clearly also comfortable with the fact that I have silver hair. And that is what's really drawing or intriguing to people, right? And so I think that's part of it, is like take the baby step to rebellion and
Mhm.
just see what happens, right? Like, and the thing is, like with my hair, like I'm like, I can always go back. Like you can always,
Right.
if it doesn't feel right, then go back. I could go back to dyeing my hair. And just one more thing about that. Like this book is not about me telling people, okay, everybody ditch the dye, don't wear makeup.
Right.
It's not that, right? What I hope people do though is they go, I'm making these decisions about what I do and how I look and what I try. And am I doing that based on what I think society says I should do? Or am I doing it because I want to do something? This is exactly what I want to do. And then and then do it, right? Dye your hair, don't dye your hair, wear makeup, don't wear makeup, like, but just understand what your reasoning behind making those decisions are.
Yes, and that's so important. That is so important, And here you talk about, and you talked about a little bit about the beauty side, because
Mhm.
that is a thing. People think that you have to dye the hair or you have to wear your makeup a certain way and all that. But one of the things that I really love, because I'm admiring what you have on right now, you also talk about fashion, because
I
that
do.
is a thing. And my mom always watches, so I know she's gonna love this because she is a clothes horse.
Well, the clothes horse in me honors the clothes horse in your mom because I am too.
But I loved in the book you kind of talk about even that whole process, because a lot of times we might think that as we get older we have to dress a certain
Yep.
way, and how it's a thing of, well, I'll let you tell it, but it's not necessarily about trying to follow trends or whatever. It's about putting on what makes you feel like your best you and how you show up in the world in the way that you want to show up. So talk a little bit about that.
So the first thing that I want to say, and the thing that I learned in writing about style, not so much fashion but style, is that style is incredibly political, and I had not really considered that. But if you think about the fact that our kids are getting, suspended for having dreadlocks, right, or for wearing their natural hair, um, that people who are, even like in some countries, if they wear hijab, they're going, they're told that that is inappropriate and it could be criminalized in some countries for wearing hijab in a non-Muslim country. So let's be very clear that what we wear is a statement, and it can be very, very political. So that was something that I hadn't really considered. Now, for me, my evolution started when I realized, well, first of all, I lost all my clothes, right, in the
Right.
hurricane. So I had to rebuild my wardrobe. And I realized that I was wearing a lot of black and gray, which I have nothing against black and gray. I think black and gray, as a matter of fact, now that my hair's silver, I actually really like gray with it. I like the way I look with it. But I was realizing that at the time I was wearing black and gray because I had heard somewhere that that is slimming. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to wear black and I'm going to wear gray because it's slimming. And I didn't realize how insane that is. Like, why would I try to minimize myself, right?
Mm.
Especially as a black woman, right? I'm a black woman. People trying to minimize me all the time. Like, I am
Well,
not going to do something that makes me small. That to me felt insane. Again, some people can wear it and they wear it because black, because it's elegant, or because, and I get it, but that was not my reasoning. My
yeah,
reasoning in my head was it'll make me look smaller. And that, when I realized that, that seemed like a messed up way to be choosing what to wear, right? Like, I didn't want to be choosing my clothing based on that. So I decided I'm going to experiment now. Now it's time to experiment. Plus, I got to rebuild my wardrobe anyway because I have no
right.
clothes, right? So I thought, well, what I thought was really interesting was I love color. My house is full of color. I'm a photographer. I don't like doing black and white photography. I prefer color photography. Like, I love color. So why don't I start looking at color, and why don't I start thinking about, if style is political, which I think I do believe it is, what do I want my style to say about me? Right?
Mhm.
How do I want to show up in the world? And I just definitely don't want to show up minimizing myself. Like, I knew that wasn't it. So I started to think about, like, okay, what are some of the colors and things that I wear? So fast forward, like, I'm from the Caribbean. I love blue. I like the way blue looks on me. It reminds me, blues and greens are my favorite colors. And
Mhm.
because it reminds me of home, right? It reminds me of the tropics. It reminds me of Trinidad. So what if I started wearing more of that? What if I wear a stack of bracelets that are all from Trinidad, right? Like, or but also my racial makeup is black, Chinese, and Indian, primarily black, Chinese. So what would it mean if I started wearing some things that nod to my ancestors who are African and Chinese and Asian, right? And South Asian. And what does that look like? And how can I start implementing these things that really sort of tell my story and I walk in the room. And that's not to say that people will look at me and go, "Oh, yes, she must be a West Indian woman of black Chinese." Like, but
All
I
right.
know that I've got a little touchstone to what my heritage is. The meanings of color. Like I love indigo because I feel like indigo is a really trustworthy color. But then I also found out that in my homeland, enslaved people grew indigo, right? And so I thought, I want to wear more indigo. So I wear lots of indigo, like dyed fabrics now often, because that's sort of a touchstone to my story as well. And I think I encourage people to sort of think about, how can you show up just by the
Right.
way you adorn yourself? What's the story you want to tell? What are the values you want to communicate, right? What are the things that you put on that just makes you feel powerful, or warm or kind, or whatever those values are that you hold so dear? Like, what colors say that about you? What are the kinds of way? And again, this is just you tapping into that for yourself. It's not that people are going to look at you and go, "Oh, she's wearing brown, so that must mean she's an earthy person." Like, that's not the point.
Right.
It's about the meaning that you ascribe to your own adornment.
Yes, and I love that. And you all, these are like
I've
my
been looking at those.
silk earrings, and you can't really see the shirt, but actually it's a
Uh-oh.
dress. But
Oh,
you
that's
see,
amazing. I love it. That's amazing.
because I am the same way,
Yeah.
in that I like to wear things, that are colorful. I like to wear, big bold earrings
Mhm.
and things like that, and I haven't always been that way.
Yep.
It's something that, as time has gone on, that it's like, I do want to be an expression of, who I am, and, all of those sorts of things. So to wear an African fabric, or a very bright colored, shirt that has this patterned, or things like that, when instead of wearing, and I'm like 5'11", and I'm not a stick.
Right. Right.
So people see me when I walk in the room anyway, but to just be like, I want to wear things that, as you said, make me feel good, that embrace color, that embrace design, all those sorts of things. I don't feel
Absolutely.
like I, need to shrink when I walk into a space. So I just love that. And I guess that is one of those things of becoming a little more mature or seasoned, because hopefully you stop caring about what people think, and you just wear what makes you feel good.
Absolutely. And the truth is that when you're wearing what feels good, people respond to it, right? Like, people are just they may not even know why they respond to it, but there's something about it. And I mean, like, even think about, um like, you can think about people who may not fit sort of what society says is beautiful in this world, but they walk in their room with their bald heads, or,
Mhm.
whatever, and they come in and they own the space. And there's something so attractive about that. And I maintain that what we're really attracted to is their spirit. And it has far
Mhm.
less to do with sort of their, like, whether or not they have a symmetrical face, or whether or not they're a size 5, or, and it far more to be with how they embody themselves, and how they embody, like, that is hella sexy, hell of attractive, and really inspiring, I think. And that is what people love. And, you know that is the sprinkles on top, right? Like, the fact that you
Right.
walk around feeling good, that's the cake, right? And the fact that other people sort of respond, that's just the pretty sprinkles on top, that's also makes it really nice, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you just mentioned it as we get ready to segue, connection, because you were
Mm,
talking about, the soul, the spirit of who you are, that people see, that radiates when you walk into a space. In the book, you also talk about having those connections, and beginning with a spiritual connection, and
yeah,
how that can look different.
yeah. That was probably, I would say, potentially the most personal part for me, that for writing that. And the first part, it actually, it's really interesting, because in the book, the spirituality follows sort of the beauty part
Hmm.
of it, right? And, like, the chapters follow, because I interviewed a woman. Her name is Karen Williams, and she is this amazing model, right? She's has this shock of white hair. She returned to modeling 30 years after not modeling, and she was talking about how, when she looks at images of herself, she can tell when she's been taking care of her spirit, right? Like, the images just look the two-dimensional images of her look better, right? And she says even photographers can tell, right? Even in the moment. And so I really wanted to look into that. I was raised Catholic. I go to an Episcopal church now, but I was really interested in sort of the spirituality that other people practice, right? And so I interviewed some really interesting people. I interviewed a woman who was a Lutheran priest, but she grew up devout Hindu, and talked about how, sort of how she incorporates the learnings of spirituality from her Hindu upbringing into her practice as a Lutheran priest. I grew up in the Caribbean, and in Trinidad we call, I'm using air quotes, black magic obia,
Mhm.
like voodoo. And I always grew up fearing that obia, like you gotta watch out for obia. And it wasn't until I was like embarrassingly old that I realized that actually obia is sort of the word that's used for Orisha, which is, of course, indigenous religion from West Africa. And I thought, how interesting that, um, like here in America, we sort of like romanticize indigenous practices to the point of sometimes co-opting and misappropriating them, right? That people do. But anything that's indigenous in Africa is evil, it's of the devil, it's black, it's everything. So I really wanted to learn more about that, and I contacted a friend of mine who has practiced Orisha all her life and learned about that. And I chose those women specifically because I am part West African. Obviously, I'm descended from West Africans as well, but I am also descended from South Asians and India. And so I thought, let me find out a little bit, because what would it mean to take some of the practices of my ancestors and incorporate them in my daily spiritual care, right? That's not to say that I want to convert to Orisha, or I want to convert to Hinduism. Like I'm not interested in doing that. But if there were things that they do that felt like they called to my spirit, and practices that they had that felt, why not go into that? And so what I encourage people to do is consider their own ancestors, because we all have ancestors, no matter what our background are, that probably have some spiritual practice that they did, and things that made them show up in a values based way, right? And what are the things? So like, one of my friend who practices Orisha, she talks about how in the morning she thinks cool mind, cool heart, right? Like cool tongue, to remind herself to stay measured and stay kind and speak kindly, and tread kindly on the earth. And so just even thinking about some of these practices that are like, I'm going to remember to be the kind of person I want to be when I show up in the world, and to check in myself, I think is a really powerful thing.
Well, some I don't know, people here that are watching may know, or may not know, but at one point in time, I actually went to seminary, and
Oh,
one of
wow.
the things being in seminary taught me is that even as a Christian, that there are pieces of other religions that have spiritual practices, or spiritual, the word's not coming to me, but basically spiritual practices
Mhm,
that that do have value. And
mhm.
there is a way that you can learn, like you think meditation, just to sit still. It doesn't have to mean you're chanting or whatever the case may be. Is all in the meaning that you choose to assign to it. But
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean that just because it might be different from what you've always done that it's necessarily bad. Because there, at least in the big three religions, I would say there is a common thread amongst them anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, and even from the perspective of being a black person, the ways that Africans, or many times black people, practice Christianity is not the same as you might get in a church that's predominantly white, but it's the same belief system, just different ways of showing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, I wanted to sort of investigate that for myself. I wanted to investigate what are some things that feel tied to the ancestors, right? Because they are here, and how can that help me just be better and show up better. And that's, and so what I'm talking about with spirituality is not specifically faith based, right? Like I think, because I also think that you can have a spirituality without having practicing a religion. Like I think no like when I talk about spirituality, I mean sort of connecting with something bigger than ourselves, whether or not you call it God or Allah or the universe or just the interconnectedness of humanity, just being able to sort of to tap into that is I think a healthy practice. And there's data that says that actual that spirit that we're wired for spirituality, we're wired to do that, and spiritual caretaking is one of the ways that we live longer well.
Yes, that's good. And also community. Community. As
Yeah,
you're chuckling because I know in the book you talk about sometimes that has been a challenge for you personally,
for
but
sure.
yes.
Yeah, I my dad, which is not like my dad, who makes an appearance in the community chapter, he's very, very good about it. There are a couple of reasons why community is difficult for me. One is I'm deeply introverted. That is just that's a fact. The other is that I grew up the daughter of somebody who worked in the energy industry, and back then we moved a lot. We moved every 2 years, and so I think I learned to be very superficial in my relationships because I knew in 2 years I could be gone, right? And so for me, cultivating uh deep relationships, friendships, let's say friendships. I mean, I've been married for 20 years, so specifically friendships is um
Right.
is something that I think is relatively new. And the fact is that people who age well have strong ties with community, with friends, with neighbors. Um and so that's a harder thing for me. And Dr. Vivek Murthy wrote a great book. He's the Surgeon General of the United States, called Together, I think is what it's called, and it's about the loneliness epidemic that we are in the world. And I think honestly,
Mhm.
it potentially, this is anecdotal, this isn't data, but my guess is that it's that starting with our sort of Gen X generation and younger, it's harder. I make up because we are like a lot of my very closest friends are people that I only see through a screen, right? Like they're in different places, and my relationships um
Right.
are
Very
are
true.
online, right? And so it's hard to be able to have that sort of um I'm just going to show up and stop by my neighbor's house, my friend's house for a cup of tea because I'm close enough with them that I can just do that
Right.
unannounced, right? Like our parents probably did, right? And so it's a lot harder for me,
Mm.
but the truth is that it's good for us to have those relationships. And I was actually talking about this just last night at the book launch, and this is sort of a teaser to the next book that I'm writing, but I'm really
Okay.
interested in cultivating interests and then seeing what community can grow from those interests, because I think it's really important not only to have good community, but I think it's really good to have intergenerational community as well. I think that
Yeah.
we all learn from each other depending on what stages of life we're in. And I think one of the more um organic ways to do that is to do it around a common interest, right? And so
Mhm.
that's something that I'm really sort of playing with. But yeah, it's a struggle for me. I admit that that's probably the hardest part of me from the practices that I learned in researching for the book.
Mhm. And it is a challenge because, as you said, we do all of this type of thing.
Yeah,
And, like a lot of people now are working from home. So maybe in the past where you would have met friends through work, you're not, really connected because you're not in the same space, all these sorts of things. And then, yeah, the pandemic, all of that. So it's definitely a challenge because when I was reading that, I was just thinking about for my own self. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm in the Atlanta area, only been here for 3 years. I knew people when I moved here, but didn't necessarily, not necessarily people that I was going to spend all of my time with, just people
right.
that I knew. But since I've been here, I was thinking, well, in the last couple of weeks, I went and did something with some of the ladies from church. I've done
Mm,
some things with some of my sorors, so it's like I'm finding ways to build that community, even though, I didn't come here with that. And that is just so important. But even in the people that I know, I guess the thing is still, I've always said the tribe, that
yep.
like the inner circle, still working on that.
Yeah.
But No, but it's just important because there are times that we do need each other.
Yeah.
We're not islands unto ourselves, and it's good to have like people that you can count on, even sometimes outside of your family, that
Yep.
can be there to be that you all can support one another in a variety of ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I found interesting, and I'm not gonna, I don't want to quote myself, but one of the researchers that in there is that what constitutes good, strong community changes over time,
Right.
right? And that things like people who are younger in their 20s and 30s, um, what they would describe as good community has to do with the quantity of people, of friends, and that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to do with the depth. These are the people that they'll go meet at a bar every Friday night or something like that. And it does not necessarily have to do with that. As we get older, we kind of want that depth. We want to be able to have, these are my ride or die, right? That tribe. These are the people that know my innermost secrets and that kind of thing. And then as we get even older, it it changes again to be like, it doesn't have to be a lot of people and it doesn't necessarily have to be that deep, but these are just sort of companionable people that we enjoy spending time with. And so it's sort of interesting that there's this evolution of what constitutes community as well. And so sort of keep that in mind and sort of understand how is my community um like nourishing me, and what are the ways that I want to be nourished in community, I think is really important as we transition from stage to stage.
It is important. It's very important. And I'm gonna have to backtrack just a little bit because
Yeah,
forgive
please.
me, I skipped over this,
Yeah,
but
no.
just real briefly. I mean, the reality of it is, as we age, there are things that we might deal with in our bodies, in our
Sure.
physicality. And I like that in the book you talk about ways in which people can really work on their physical being as well.
Yeah.
There are several things that you mentioned, like getting the tests so that you know what's really going on in your body, and then a couple other things. So before we get to the end, I wanted to
Yeah.
piggyback, double back to that because that's important as
It is
well.
important. So I actually went into that chapter feeling very frustrated,
Mm,
because, like I'm sure many of us, I relied probably too heavily on Dr. Google, and if you rely on Dr. Google, you find out that you should be eating high protein. No, you shouldn't be eating high protein. You should be vegan. Wait, no, no, no. You should be vegetarian. No, you should give up dairy. No, you should give up gluten. Oh, wait, all these different things. Oh, you should do 10,000 steps. Actually, 10,000 steps isn't good. You should do 8,000 steps, right? Like, you have all of these different messages of what it means to take care of your health, right? And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to an acquaintance of mine, now a very good friend, who is a nutritional neurologist. So she's a board certified neurologist who specifies on the way nutrition affects our nervous system and our cells, right? Um, and I wanted her to do a complete workup with me. But the other thing, and probably the thing that was most um eye-opening for me, is my friend Dr. Rita is she's the daughter of a doctor as well, and they are from India. And so she also sort of infuses her work with Ayurvedic um philosophy. And one of the things that she said, which I thought was so interesting, was she rejected the notion of food being medicine, right? Which
mhm.
I thought, what are you talking about? We've heard that all the time. And she
Right,
said, well, in Ayurvedic medicine, we talk about nourishing the health within us, and we all have health within us, no matter what physical condition we're in, because as long as we're breathing, there's health within us. And
right,
she says that food is energy, and it should be used to nourish our health. Saying food is medicine focuses on illness, and
right,
focuses, and we shouldn't be focusing on illness. We should be focusing on health. And so that sort of blew open everything for me as far as how I want to take care of myself. Yes, for food, I want nourishing food to nourish my health. And by the way, everybody's body is different. So all of those, you should eat vegan, you should eat meat, you should do everything like that. Like, eat what's good for your specific health. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to sort of tune into your own body and go to your doctor, right? To figure out what's going on with your own health. But now I move for health. I hated working out. I never say I work out, but I have a movement practice that I do.
mhm,
And I do it because it's a way to exorcise, EXOR, exorcise
Mhm.
sort of stress out of my body, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the ways that we can get rid of stress. And so that's what I do. But every day I sort of figure out, okay, it's time for me to move. What do I want to do today? Sometimes I do a Pilates class. Sometimes I walk a few miles. Sometimes I hula hoop. Actually, a lot of times I hula hoop, but it's really about joyful movement for me because I want to nourish what my with the health that's already within my body. One thing I do want to say, and this is a theory, this is not fact, but this is a theory, is one of the things when we get to midlife, we find that maybe the weight that used to fall off of us when we skipped a meal doesn't like to budge anymore. And there is this theory that that reason for that is evolutionary, that when we
Mm.
are in midlife, our body likes to hold on to weight because as we get to our 80s and 90s, it can be difficult to keep weight on. And so
Mhm.
it's what our bodies want to do to make sure that as we get older, we have something to work with. And that theory, again, theory, felt like grace for me, right? Like it felt like, oh, this is just the evolution of my body. And as long as I'm taking care of and nourishing my health and moving and eating good food, my body's going to do what it's going to do. And
Right.
try to fight it and try to get it back into its, 22-year-old shape is a
Right.
fool's errand, right? Because that's not what my body is designed to do right now. And that's not what health for my body looks like for me right now. And so that was really, really, um, again, it's a theory, so I wouldn't take it as gospel, but it's a lovely way to kind of take yourself out of this punishing, trying to get myself into a stage of life that we're just not in anymore.
Right. And thank you. And I'm glad I circled back to that because that is so important because we can talk about aging, but the reality of it is there is a certain level of health that we have to have from within that
Yes.
allows us to do all of these other things.
Absolutely,
You
absolutely.
can't do that stuff if you're laid up,
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that I like that you talk about is that, you may go to a doctor and they may say, oh, that's just happening because you're getting older. That might mean that you need a new doctor, someone who's
Yeah.
actually going to talk to you and work with you to try to figure out what's really going on and not just put it on the fact that you're getting older. I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
loved that, and that one, Ashton Applewhite, who is an amazing anti-ageism, activist. She was the one who said, told me that, when she went to her doctor, she was like, "Doctor, I have this knee that's bothering me," and he was like, "Oh, you're getting older," and she's like, "Well, yeah, except the other knee is fine and it's the same age. So can we please figure out what's going on with
That
this
part.
knee?" Right? So I love that sort of idea. Like, no, just because your doctor thinks it's because you're getting older, his job or her job is to make you feel better. So just don't accept that. If your body, if something is wrong, like that's fine. Maybe it does have to do with age. It does. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be treated. That doesn't mean that you should be living in pain. Like there are there are things, and keep staying curious about how can we ease my discomfort, because that's really, really important.
It is. It is. Now, in the last few minutes that we
Yeah.
have, and this is the last section of the book, talks about envisioning, and it's a couple things that you touch on in that part. One has to do with just having a mission, having a life mission, having passion, kind of figuring out how you want to show up in the world and what that looks like. And then the other is play and
Yeah.
how we play.
Yeah.
So let's talk about mission because I think sometimes people, we hear about having a purpose or having a mission or having a vision. And sometimes people might think that as you get older that you don't have one anymore or it's
Ooh.
not as important or whatever the case may be. But of course, we know that's
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Not only is it not true, I think that as we get older, our mission becomes clearer, right? I think that we start to know each other better. And we know the things that we like to do and the things that we don't like to do, the things that are fun for us that fill us up, right? The things that drain us. I think also we start to, because we hopefully have had some time in the world to kind of look around, we know what ills of the world trigger us, right? Like what, and that can be different for everybody. It is different for everybody. It might be that you feel um like their kids don't have equal access to education, so I want to be a somebody who helps that. It could be saving the animals, it could be saving the environment. Like there's all these different things, and we start to realize there are things in the world that I feel like I am called to help make better. One, and also there are things that I do that I know bring me joy and that I know people appreciate when I do. And that can be everything from, singing, making a tuna fish sandwich, raising money, whatever, accountancy, whatever, my legal skill, whatever it is, right? And I say, and actually my previous book talks about this a lot, about how do you marry that thing that you love to do to help address that thing that you're passionate about. And when you get older, those things become far more clear. And marrying those things and really kind of working toward that purpose. And I actually suggest you write it down. I call it a spark statement, but I
Mm,
suggest this is what I'm called to do, and this is the way that I'm called to do it. And really have something very clear written down. And the reason that I suggest you write it down is because it can be a tool of discernment as you go forward about, because there are so many ills, right? If it's not a war going on in some place, it's somebody, it's civil rights being violated back home, right? Like there's, or
right.
the environment being, like there's so many things, but understanding this is my thing and this is how I can do it can make it very clear on how you want to direct your energy going forward. And having that purpose, the Japanese call it ikigai, I think it's not in the book, but I just learned about it in the Blue Zones thing. Ikigai or ikigai or something like that, don't quote me on that. Having that sort of purpose is how you age well.
Mm.
Understanding where to direct that energy is how we age well. And so I really, really encourage people to sort of do a little bit of introspection to figure out those things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Kind of like I was saying earlier, I don't have a desire to retire. And that's part of the
Yeah,
reason, because there is a mission, there is a vision, there are things that I can see myself doing, through this platform and, outside of that platform that really, adds value to the world and kind of, making my on the world and taking what I'm passionate about and what I'm skilled at and being able to make a difference. So I do think that that's so important. And I also I believe you touch on it in the book. I'm pretty sure you do, but it's something about having something to work on or having something to look forward to kind of keeps you going, can keep you here, can make your life better and fuller and you live longer.
absolutely. And live longer better. Like because that's what we want, right? Like we want to live longer better. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, if it's a
Yeah,
choice between longevity or is a choice between living a good life but a shorter life, I'd rather live the shorter life. Like, I want to make sure that I am like as excited about life as until my dying day, that I am as looking forward, that I'm feeling purposeful, that I'm helping people, that I'm being of service to my dying day. That's what I want to do. And so having that understanding of where you can fit in making the world better, that just helps that happen, right?
absolutely. And last but not least, we work hard, we gotta play hard. And I love that you have a chapter in the book that talks about what it means to play, to engage with
Yeah.
play.
So play was an interesting one for me because I think a lot of us adults anyway, especially a lot of us who may have children, um, we forget to play, right? Because we're so busy um making sure that our careers are right or that we're good partners or that, our children are safe, right? That kind of thing, that we forget what it means to play. And to be clear, play is not just a sport. Like that
Mhm.
sports actually don't interest me at all. But play can be travel. Play can be constantly learning more things. Play can be playing jokes on people or humor. Play can be cooking. Play the point of play is to do something where you sort of lose track of time because you're enjoying so much what it is. It's often not tied to the outcome of being excellent. It's just
Right.
about about enjoying the moment and being very, very present. And Stuart Brown, who founded the National Institute for Play and says studied play, says that in his research, he finds that the people who continue to thrive are people who make play a priority in their life. So, like for me, I love hula hooping. That's one of the ways I play. Travel is another way that I love to play. And so, really understanding your own play personality and tapping into that. I think we talked before we started recording that, a little selfish is a good thing. I think a
Mhm.
little selfish is a good way to take care of ourselves. And so, if you need to build play in for yourself, trust and believe that taking care of yourself and that selfishness is going to pay back sevenfold in the way that you show up in your work and for your kids and for your partners. So I think that's a really, really important thing is really making time to play.
Yes, yes. And as I did say, we talked about before we came on, and you saw the video at the beginning, the things that I talk about, like what it means to live well. This book is the perfect companion to the whole concept of what I deem it to mean to live well. So I am so glad that you were able to join us. And for those who do buy the book, because I suggest you get a copy of the book.
That's what it looks
In the
like.
back, yes, yeah, there is a space where you can basically create your own Radiant Rebellion handbook. There are some prompts and things like that kind of help you walk through some of the things, because at the first part you're kind of reading and getting thoughts and ideas, and in the back it gives you some tips and tools on how to engage with some of these radiant rebellious concept of yourself for yourself. So I
Absolutely.
really love that. I really love that. So Karen, it's been such a pleasure. There are a lot of people in the room and they're liking it. They're just not leaving comments today, but that's here. I'm seeing the hearts and I'm seeing,
I'm so glad.
thumbs up and all that stuff. So this is such an important conversation though, because as I said at the beginning, if you keep on living, you're gonna get older.
Absolutely. That's the goal. That is the
Right.
goal, right? That's the
Right. And
goal.
it's just being able to embrace it and to have, a radiant, rebellious attitude about it and to be, to not let anyone make you feel bad about the fact that you're getting older, not to have anyone telling you, oh, well, you can't do this or you shouldn't do that or you shouldn't, wear your hair that way or, whatever. You're going to do what is best for you. And that's what I love so much about this work that Karen has done.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so glad that you love the book. I hope everybody buys a copy of the book. It's out now, and yeah, I hope my hope for everybody is that whoever reads this book, they feel healed by it, and they feel energized to create their own evolution and expansion.
Yes, and I just threw this up there, shameless plug but there is a Brown Girl Collective bookstore that is tied to Bookshop. So if you're interested in picking up a copy, the book is listed there as Karen has been one of our guests. So you can find the book there or at any bookstore near you if you choose to get it elsewhere. But I did want to ask before we get ready to go. I know that the book just came out yesterday,
Yeah.
so you were in the process of touring and doing online events and things like that. Is there any place in particular that people can be on the lookout for you?
Oh, yes. So on October 20 next Thursday, what is that? That would be October 26th, I think.
Yes.
26th, I'm going to be in New York City at Recirculation bookstore. It's in Washington Heights. I can't remember. It's on Riverside Avenue. So Recirculation. And then on November 2nd, I'll be in San Antonio at the Nowhere Bookshop in San Antonio. So those are both. And then there is also on October 30th a virtual book launch event that will be happening online. If you just go to KarenWalrond.com or come to my Instagram, Hey Chookalunks, you'll see everything right there. So I will see some of you there at one of those times.
Yes, that sounds good. So if you could just hold on for me for 1 second, I'm going to let you get some water, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to bid everyone else adieu, but just hold on for me for 1 second. So
Will
thanks
do.
again, and I hope to see you again because you mentioned something about the next book. You are definitely welcome to come back again as
I
well.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So hold on for 1 second. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and watching. And please, go and pick up a copy of the book and, be sure to tell your friends to, watch this video because they can learn, and they can also pick up a copy of the book, and perhaps you can come together and have a book club where you all discuss it and begin to build that community and do some of the things that Karen describes so well in the book, and making sure that we are reclaiming our aging, practicing joy, and raising a little hell along the way. That's the part I really like. So just to let you know what's happening next week, we will be going in a different direction. Actually, the book for next week is It's Always Been Ours, Rewriting the Story of Black Women's Bodies. And it's basically about, how we reclaim our bodies, how people, and actually Karen touched upon it a bit, of how we get all these beauty standards of what we're supposed to look like or how we're supposed to be. But in this particular book with Jessica Wilson, she is going to talk to us about, basically reclaiming our bodies for ourselves. So I'm definitely looking forward to that conversation next week. So in the meantime and in between time, everyone have a good evening, a good morning, a good afternoon, depending on what time you're joining us and where you're joining us from. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.